Does the renewed conflict strengthen or weaken Netanyahu? On the one hand, he's presided over a catastrophic intelligence failure. On the other, he can point to this as being the result of Israeli society being divided against itself. Does he come out of this hobbled, or prime minister for life? I would say it will strengthen him first. But after the dust settles and investigations in the failures start, I expect him to be booted. Strengthen. Terrorist attacks are always good for the right. You saw that with Bush's sky-high post 9/11 approval. IMHO. This will strengthen Bibi. He's a fascist. And external enemies are always an asset to fascists. This will also bleed focus away from his thus far frighteningly successful attempts to consolidate all governmental power in his own hands. I have no clue what public opinion is like in Israel. But what's going to happen is Palestine loses for now. And Netanyahu, once he gets his victory, is going to try and sell it like Israel is now better off because of the war and Hamas is worse off. I think Israelis will be appreciative of him being frank and calling it war. Regardless, Netanyahu stays in office. My concern is, how does this affect Israeli attitude to Palestine, and does it embolden nationalism and the right? It's a great question. You're gonna have to ask an actual Israeli or an expert. Too early to tell. This was a massive intelligence failure. Is Netanyahu partly to blame? I thought Israeli intelligence was the best in the world? Sigh. Pensive face. I still can't even figure out what side I am on. Hate war, killing, and terrorism. Hate the treatment of Palestinians. But not anti-Israel. Hate anti-Semitism. But hate anti-Islamic talk. Absolutely, this will strengthen his administration. He was always a hawkish politician. And this incident will be seen by many as a validation of his long-standing positions. Temporarily strengthen. But it might end up like a Golda Meir situation where the failure to prepare becomes a scandal. This will strengthen him like crazy. They've targeted civilians, some from other countries too. This is the exact reason he needed to completely get rid of Gaza. Definitely strengthen. While many people may be protesting a right-wing government in Israel, they will now rally behind the flag against the invading forces. It may also help his cause that, being a right-wing government, they take stronger action against these invaders, and may show why electing them was a good idea. Whether you believe that or disagree with his politics, if he handles the situation in a strongman sort of way, which seems to be the case, I can see many Israelis supporting him in future elections because of it. I'm guessing it will strengthen him in the short term since people come together in a crisis. But I think it will weaken him in the long term since it happened on his watch. It was his responsibility to prevent it. And he didn't. Strengthen to the point where the massive intelligence failure is making me a bit of a conspiracy theorist now. Fascists are a nightmare in practice. All their tough guy talk is just smoke. They're spending most of their time stuffing their pockets with money, not working on actual defense or on the welfare of citizens. Strengthen him. No question about that. It would strengthen any leader in such a position. Ever known such a thing to weaken a leader? Maybe in the aftermath and their failure to respond correctly. But Neti isn't likely to screw that up. I think Prime Minister for life. If the IDF wasn't so utterly incompetent, I was toying with the idea Netanyahu actually knew and allowed it. Strengthen. Likely domestic issues like judicial changes will be put on hold until the end of this conflict. Mass attacks and kidnappings of civilians just trying to enjoy their holiday has erased much of the sympathy the West had for Palestine. The war is also likely to expand to Lebanon and Iran. Hezbollah has launched rockets from Lebanon, and Iran has been supplying both Hezbollah and Hamas with rockets for years. Nation is now moving to a war footing. Isn't he already president for life? I feel like this dude has been in office since I was in high school and I'm in my 40s. Absolutely strengthens him and the hard right in Israel. This is essentially Israel's 9/11. And we all know how united that made Americans. The Yom Kippur War led to the end of Golda Meir's time in office. The same thing could happen to Netanyahu, especially if he blames Israeli liberals instead of his own intelligence service. The Israeli left isn't calling for open borders with Gaza, and even if they were, that certainly isn't happening. Blaming the left for this latest attack will be viewed as passing the buck. Israeli conservatives could conclude that Netanyahu is incompetent and needs to be replaced. This is going to be a difficult discussion to have here given the lack of hard, current data. But there's compelling reports that suggest a significant number of Israelis are furious at Bibi for focusing on his hard-line domestic agenda, which many of them oppose, as we saw via protest, and allowing this to happen. Make no mistake, there was a massive intelligence and preparedness failure here. Weakened. A lot of Israelis are pretty pissed that there was a significant intelligence failure, and probably justly see it as his failure of leadership. Weaken so fucking hard. His entire platform was the strongman who was the only one who could protect Israel from outside threats. And so far under his watch, terrorists invaded Israel. Terrorists took over towns. Terrorists kidnapped 100 people into Gaza. And all the while, the army took 7 hours to start responding. The members of the Knesset were instructed to not talk to the press. Bibi only made a statement by the evening. As of me writing this message, there are still towns under Hamas control. If this shit doesn't end this asswipe's career, I don't know what will. Strengthen. And I don't think it will be just a small bit. Even the most ardent of his opponents will not be able to turn this into a win if they back the Palestinians. I also don't think they will. This is something that will unite all Israelis whether they like or hate Netanyahu. Weaken. People love the Palestinians. This will polarize the issue and kill the Abraham Accords. Israel was coasting toward a consensus acceptance of what they're doing. Weaken. I hope the youth know he brought this on by his treatment of Palestinians as second-class citizens. There was never any hope for a one-state solution. I wonder the response to this if the Palestinians were white Christians and the Israeli were Muslim Arabs. Think conservatives would be rushing to aid Israel? Far right will find someone more hateful and charismatic to replace him. He comes out the same criminal that he went in. I suspect he had advanced knowledge of this. Condoleezza Rice knew about 9/11. And with that tragedy, the Bush administration had the perfect pretext to wage multiple illegal wars. Bush was a criminal before for stealing the election and a criminal after for waging illegal wars of aggression on the basis completely fabricated lies. Netanyahu is no different. He's a cold-blooded murderer. And he won't let this crisis go to waste. Hobbled. Except for a brief period, he's been in charge more than a decade. The buck stops there. Right-wing parties might get a boost if they are seen as tougher on terrorism. But not Bibi. 1000 strengthen. So much so that I honestly wonder if he allowed this to happen so people will forget he's a criminal and the people will embrace him being a dictator.